Hello Year 11. So this is your half-term homework for food, and what I am going to ask you to do represents how the course is assessed. So half of your time I want you to spend on your NEA and half of the time I want you to spend on preparing for the PPE, and that represents the percentage on how you are assessed in this subject. So when I talk about the NEA, I want to really get you to focus on NEA 2. So that is as up to date as possible, ready for you to start time planning your final 3 dishes, ready for the exam when we hit the PPE fortnight. So far you should have a front cover with all your details on, very simple. What you should do is copy the context that you are answering on that front cover so that the examiner knows exactly what it is they're supposed to be looking at. You should have a task analysis where you explore the opportunities of the brief. There are headings that you should consider that relate to the keywords that are in the brief, and you should show an open-minded approach to who you might cook for, what those recipes and ingredients might include. If you use this slide here, you will see that the range of questions you might answer about each brief are on there, and also you can use the title of the brief to copy and paste onto your front cover if you haven't done so already. The majority of you are looking at the last column, which is the North and South American cuisine. You then need to do some research, and the places you can look for secondary research are on the slide in front of you. So most of you will go straight to the internet, but there's nothing wrong with looking in recipe books or on newspaper articles. Some of you are talking about family connections, so you could look maybe at writing down some recipes from family members. That's all research, it all counts. You just need to present it nicely by writing it up. So research might spread over 2 pages. It can be lots of written information. It's nice if it includes diagrams as well. It might include pictures of food, pictures of ingredients, pictures of guidance, information about the nutrition needed, depending on the brief that you're doing. The questions you might need to ask yourself for each of the briefs are on this slide. So what do you need to find out? The bullet points show what you could research for each of the briefs. You don't have to use those headings, but it might give you a guidance if you're not sure what to do. You then need to complete your design ideas. Most of you have got the framework of 9 design ideas where you have considered different dishes that you could cook. You must give a reason for choosing that particular recipe. So how does it link to the brief? How does it include calcium? How is it a plant-based meal? How does it suit the American theme? And you must also list the skills that you would show by cooking that recipe. The easiest way of laying that out is in a table or in columns like the example you can see here. So you should give the subheading of the dish, give the dish a title. You should copy and paste a picture of that dish from the internet. You should give a reason for choosing that particular idea, and you should list the skills that you would use, and the skills audit would help you with that. That is a repetitive but ever so simple task. You are all capable of doing that. It just needs you dedicating the time to do it. You need to aim through the process, find the pictures, do that for between 9 and 12 dishes. The minimum that you need to be trying to find ideas for is 9 dishes. So it's likely to take 3 slides worth of space, or you might be able to fit it onto 2, but certainly you need to give a good reason for choosing it and the skills that you would use. This slide is a new one that I haven't asked many of you to do yet, but what it does is sum up reasons for choosing which 3 or 4 dishes actually you've chosen to make for your skills trials. So this is a piece of work called Select or Reject, where you list the dishes that you've already researched in your design ideas, title the dishes, and then explain how your thoughts have led you to decide whether to select that recipe to cook in your skills trial or reject it. It might be that you're going to save that particular idea ready for your final exam. That's fine. It might be that you've decided that it's not close enough to your theme to bother cooking, or that it's too simple to cook and you're not showing enough skills. So explain to the examiner from the list of your design ideas which ones you've decided to cook and which ones have you decided not to cook, and most importantly for the higher grades, why. So the evaluation slides where you're writing up your skills trials are where you provide evidence to the exam board of what you've cooked by including a picture of your product. Most of you have completed these slides in lessons. Some of you, quite honestly, haven't used your time wisely in lessons and do have some gaps to fill. But this is the only opportunity you have to prove to the examiner that you have done this cooking, that backs up any write-up that myself or Mr. McGethy make into the exam board. So it should have a picture of your work. It should justify why you've decided to make that recipe. That's massively important for the higher grades. It should list the main stages of making. That does not mean that you need to copy the entire recipe. The instructions on the help sheet you've got did say you could copy the recipe over, but then simplify it to just include the main stages, and you do need to simplify it. It should not be copied and pasted. You should explain the skills that you've used to make that recipe and also consider how you could upskill. So you're showing that you're reflecting on how challenging that recipe was. You should do a sensory analysis using a star diagram, but then evaluate that sensory analysis. So what was positive about the taste and the appearance and the texture of that recipe? What could be improved? You should look at the costing and evaluate the costing. Was it reasonable? Was it too expensive? Could it be scaled up? Was it too cheap? Could it have included more exotic ingredients to make it sound a smarter recipe? Evaluate the costing. Consider the ethics of your ingredients. Have you used fair trade? Have you used organic? Have you used free range? And also come up with an overall evaluation of the dish. Have you done what you were asked to do with that particular topic? Does it answer the brief well enough? What you don't need to do, and this is something that I've learnt very recently in some online CPD from the exam board, is you do not need to do a nutritional analysis for the skills trials. You can, and it won't hurt your grade if you have done nutritional analysis. And I would argue that actually if you're doing the calcium brief and maybe the plant-based brief, that you should be analysing the nutrition of your dishes, because you need to prove that there are enough nutrients in the dish that you've chosen. You need to prove that it's got high calcium levels, for instance. But for the skills trials, you don't have to do a nutritional analysis. So if you haven't, this is a way of saving time and missing them out on this stage. When you evaluate your final dishes, all 3 dishes that you cook in the exam, yes, you will have to do a nutritional analysis, but you don't have to at this stage for the skills trials. So that brings us to the end of what's expected in terms of your NEA. Most of that should be in place, and if it is in place, well done. You've kept up with the pace over the last term, and you can spend the rest of your time over half term preparing for your PPE. If you're not in the right place with your NEA, now is the last opportunity to really get to grips with it, because time is going to fly after half term. We will be doing time plans and getting ready for your final exam. That final exam is just 2 weeks away before the end of term, when you'll have evaluations to write on your final dishes. So you have to use the opportunity of half term to really blitz any gaps in your NEA and get them caught up so that they're ready for marking and final assessment. Likewise, I'm not going to show you anything about NEA 1 now, but some of you still have gaps in NEA 1. So you need to go back to your document, you need to look at the comments, and you need to make those improvements. If you don't understand what you need to do for any of the NEA topics, then email me. If you can't find the help sheets or you need it explained in a different way, email me. And I really, really mean that. I'm more than happy to help students who are trying to help themselves. Right, the other half of your assessment is your exam, your final written exam, which you will get to practice again in the PPE. Lots of you have commented to me in the last week or so that the questions are always the same. Well, there are some slight differences, but I agree there is a similarity between each exam paper. So therefore, there is no excuse not to be making improvement every time you do an exam paper, is going to be my retort back to you if you say they're all the same again. First 20 questions are multiple choice. They settle us in nicely, and then the longer responses happen in section B, where you might have to answer up to 12 marks worth of questions. The overall list of topics is on the front page of the PPE pack that you picked up in your PPE assembly. And you'll also see it if you skip through this video. You can pause on different pages if you have lost the booklet or you would like a colour version. So as we go through the booklet, the topics that you need to know, the information that you need to know, is presented in chronological order for the exam paper. So the questions that you see, the topics and the prompts that you see on the first few pages are the 20 mark questions, or the multiple choice questions, and as we go through the paper you're going to need to write more. The pictures there are prompts. They give you some of the information you need about each topic, but they don't give you all of it. So if you're looking at a picture and you're not sure what all of the information means, that's your prompt that you need to go out and find more information. So for instance, we're looking at carbohydrates. Hopefully you're familiar with the idea that there's starchy carbohydrates which are savoury, and there's sugary carbohydrates which are sweet. You should hopefully be familiar with the idea that mono and disaccharides are sweet and polysaccharides are savoury. So all the starchy carbohydrates are, for instance, polysaccharides. What you need to do is memorise the more scientific terms underneath each of those headings. If you don't happen to remember that particular bit, that's your signpost that you decide then to go and look at Seneca, or you look at BBC Bite Size to find out some more information, or just do a search about starchy carbohydrates on Google, for instance. So this is here as a prompt. It is not all of the information that you need. It's just a reminder of the sorts of knowledge that you need under each heading. So here we are with this difference between saturated and unsaturated fats. If you can't remember what that is, go and find out. There's a definition of organic farming. If you need to know more, go and find it out. Thin knowledge about how we use emulsifiers to make mayonnaise, you might need to find that out. They're just reminders and prompts to give you a visual hint as to what the topic involves. Then we move on to the slightly longer answers that you would need, and again the PPE information I've put together does the same job. Gives you hints about what you would need to be able to answer with some very brief questions and some facts that you just need to memorise. All of this information about food is easy to find on the internet. I've tried to put headings on the pages. It's directly linked to the questions in this particular paper. And what we'll do after the PPE is look at, well, if this is in this paper, what might or might not be in your final exam. So these are just prompts to remind you. So if you remember everything there is about body mass index and obesity, that tells you you don't need to revise it. But if you can't remember what HDL and LDL cholesterol are and where they come from and how we can use one to clear the other, that's where you need to do some research. So reminders about the basic information that we know from food. Okay, so that's it. That's what I'm expecting from you. Absolute genius over the half-term period. It is quite a lot of hefty work, but that's because we're coming to the point where half of your course is going to be finished in 6 weeks' time. So there has to be that final push. There has to be that big acknowledgement from you and a growth in maturity from some of you that shows that you understand that you've got to get your coursework finished by the final deadline of the 29th of March, so that you can go into your final exam with the confidence that you've done your best with the coursework. Use half term wisely. You do need a break as well. It's been a hard half term, but this is, as I said earlier in my video, your last opportunity to really catch up and make a difference if you've got NEA work missing. I also want to see an improvement in your PPE grades from your mocks, so use the resources I've given you in lessons and also your PPE pack to help you prepare. And I do mean what I say. If you have any questions, please email. I might not get back to you immediately over the holiday, but I will get back to you. Have a rest and work hard when you're not resting. I'll see you at the end of February.